Welcome back to TTC. Two new air hammers on today's episode take on the benchmark for what's often called the most powerful 401 shank air hammer on the market, the Snap-on PH3050B. So we're going to dyno them for their power, measure how good their triggers are, rank them, and take one apart to inspect its primitive cheat codes. Well, it's really like one new air hammer and one that's just the brand's latest, but you guys wanted us to check it out because some say it beats the Snap-on as well, and that's this. We bought the Aircat 5250 AT. It's their 401 shank Super Duty air hammer. It comes in at 11 1/8 inches in length with a quick chuck attached, a bit longer than the other red guy from Snap-on, but what makes for the obvious difference here, the reason these tools are worth looking at, is the price difference. The Snap-on these days goes for $535. I feel we hadn't dynoed it all that long ago, and even then it was $474 at the time of testing. Things change quite a bit these days, but it is made in the US, and yeah, powerful. Everyone agrees on that. This new Aircat is $250, so less than half, made in Taiwan from an established tool brand, and some differentiating features like this power regulator. That's a bit funky, we think. We'll get into that. This model is similar in price to the new Ingersoll Rand we tested, which was quite good for its short length, but not quite Harbor Freight levels of savings, which goes for $140. What's different to those for this is that reviewers and our viewers say Snap-on like in the beans. So let's find out. Our first test is at the manufacturer's recommended 90 psi working pressure. Here's what the Snap-on looks like versus what a statistically average long barrel air hammer makes from the models we've tested. So yeah, peppy, but this isn't even its final form. It does love higher pressure, as some of you know, coming up. Here's that Aircat in white. $4,590. Nice. This is definitely one of those hammers that doesn't just register high numbers, but feels like it's the upper crust level of air hammer sauce. It's also got that regulator on the bottom, but oddly, we haven't found it to do all that much. That last run was its best in setting 4. Here's in setting 2. $44.90 now from $45.90. Can't say it's all that worth messing around with this thing, at least on the one we got. The last guy on today's short trip down Airhammer Lane, since these things aren't exactly debuting daily, has an uphill battle for no other reason than at face value looking at its price. This is the Astro Thor 401K, the first Thor class of Super Duty air hammer, and the common bit size of 401 shank that most of the world's attachments run on. Now, if you're familiar with the 4980 Big Nasty or 498K Thor 498 shank big guys, this sort of industrial no frills, here's your power in a polished aluminum body old school thing and nothing else going on look is not new to you. But she's a long, slender girl, 12 inches, fully loaded with a quick chuck, not a short tool by any means, and yeah, longer than the Aircat. What's cool or potentially cool about this thing, though, is on two fronts. Well, it's trigger as well, but we'll get into that. One, it's supposed to take on the big boys from the tool trucks, those sometimes untouchable, very powerful air hammers. And two, it's like $120. Well, that was our price when making this. It's $114, $110 now, I don't know. Check the link below to be sure. But either way, we're talking cheaper than Harbor Freight. Still made in Taiwan like that Chief is, and its performance brother from Mac Tools. And the Matco as well for that matter, but $110, $120, I'd normally not waste my time at a price like that. To be frank, I do work with AP tools all the time, so I'm biased, see description below, but if it makes the beans, it makes the beans, and the only way to do that is to hit this dyno hard, so let's see it. This is its max power 90 psi running pressure run, on screen, in blue. So 3907, near average at the end, nothing crazy, but this is a weird one. We do 3 tests as usual and show median on screen, and the 401K made more and more each time we used it, and not by a little. And that's because of what's written on this label and in the features of this tool, that the air hammer has to be used to wear in because of tight tolerance, and you should use it for 8 times. and then you'll get full beans. We did use it 3 times, but here's the 5th time we ran this test, 3907 to beat. $42.54 up from 3907. Okay, and here's our 9th run. It plateaued after this, and we're not going to test this thing 20 times. It would seem unfair. $45.01, nice. So up in that snap-on-ish conversation, but not quite unseating the Aircat, which did very well here. So let's take this thing apart to see what's going on and how these work. And you'll need a very long wrench and a lot of heat if you want to accomplish that. So reason number 1 this air hammer is so long is it has this large vibration damping valve body assembly, which is going to have a spring and spring actuated valve specifically for impact damping, as well as a valve body for directing pressure behind the piston as quickly as possible. Smaller and medium barrel air hammers don't have this. Long barrel air hammers sometimes do, but obviously to make that spring valve more effective, it makes for a longer assembly and a longer tool, which is one reason this tool doesn't feel as rowdy either. The size of the main valve body holes in machine passageways dictates some of the power it does make, but the biggest reason an air hammer like this might be longer is this. That 700 Nitro Express looking hammer piston. If you're limited in bore size but want to add weight, adding length is the only direction you can go, but increasing length of a piston within a cylinder reduces effective stroke, and stroke alone is the old school traditional way to compare air hammer power, because longer stroke, more time to reach a higher velocity, so it's a give and take on this end of the equation, or you can just do both in this case and make a longer tool. Though this one's definitely favoring the piston side of things. Just look at this. One difficulty you can have when you're slapping around hardware like that is dialing it back. We're going to include the Chief in the rest of our tests today, as it's the reigning power per dollar sort of option these days, and we'll also illustrate what we're talking about now, which is trigger modulation, using the tool to deliver minimum power by just feathering that trigger. Here's the snap-on up against the Harbor Freight Chief. So yeah, the snap-on back massager is just 142, while the Chief is off into the stratosphere with 2500 plus. But does this matter? Well, especially on 401 shank, I'll let Eric O of South Main Auto demonstrate.
So I'm going to give it a little whack to make sure that axle's staying in there. Just give it a little whisper. You just got to relieve the tension from it, or pressure. You choose. Then we'll give it a little punch. Whoa, fella. Just like so. Didn't even nick the axle. So in case you're wondering, you gotta control yourself, man. I think she's thin enough. I could be wrong. Fire! I think this stuff's gonna kill me, man. Yeehaw! Oh, mother, almost got me. So there's that. There's our axle. Clean and green, no scars. No fuss, no muss. No muss, no fuss.
So sometimes you want Armageddon, and sometimes you want a scalpel. Both of those save you time. And that's the story with this 401K. For the last 2 years, prototypes of this model have been out with field testers, including Eric at South Main Auto, who often use the prototype on screen. The purpose being to rein in that trigger feathering ability.
Light massage. Let's see if we can get her in there. There we go.
The Astro Big Nasty is a bit of a handful out of the gates on that trigger, so it was needed and something the 401K tries to be better at. Let's see it. 144, pretty darn good. I'd call this run typical. Could you do better? Yes, it's there, but it's not quite as buttery smooth as a snap-on, so this is pretty representative, I feel. It's not a lot of force. And here's the Aircat. Sorry for the focus. Yeah, for all the talk about the Thor's trigger, the Aircat is probably the nicest trigger we've ever used on an air hammer. The ramp up in particular is super gradual and predictable, which is what you want. A record here and just damn impressive. So enough kids play, let's see what these can do with a more shop realistic line pressure of 150 psi static. It drops to whatever the tool causes it to drop to, like in real life. Snap-on air tools just seem to love this. 5233, that's the number to beat to be considered the king of the hill around here in 401 shank. The Chief doing mighty good for a $140 tool. Let's see that $250 Aircat. $5,037, super good. Only the third 401 shank to break into the 5Ks on this channel, and the other two are around $500 these days. I'd call that a win. Besides the regulator here and rare recommending of breaking in there, there's also another oddity to measure today, made for a pretty fun day when we were just testing two air hammers, but it's this exhaust port on the Aircat. This is where the air exits the tool so that the piston can cycle back. It's where you put your frickin' hand. The 401K has a rotatable guard with air passage cutouts for this. The Aircat, no such luck, and we found ourselves having to hold it basically like an OK sign wrapped around the barrel to not block the exhaust port. But we also measured ignoring that and just holding it where it felt comfortable to, you know, for science. Also in white. $44.31, quite a drop from $5,037, and that's just holding the tool, not exactly trying to block anything interesting. Anyways, we made it to the end. Here's the cheapest air hammer of the bunch, the Thor 401K. Dude, this thing is nasty. $51.35. In person, on paper, in tests, did it overall beat the Snap-on? None of us think it does, quite. But let's head over to the rank chart, our rank chart that's famously heavily skewed in favor of power figures. Since all this other stuff is advertised already, you can just look it up. Let's see how they did considering everything. Starting below the Snap-on for now, they get some points for the lower operating pressure power output, but the bulk of their points overall for the most they were able to achieve today. Then for the range you'd be working with between minimum and max power, all with the same inlet pressure, trigger range, basically, they get awarded these points. As a function of their length, that's 45.4 and 42.8 points. Then as a function of performance and price, that's 17.3, which is quite high actually, and 36.8, a record in long barrels. That totals 645.3 and 683.6. Even on a ranking where power has ruled in the past, the Thor pulling it out for first place in 401 shank air hammers due to value and not having a terrible trigger. And that Aircat also being a lucky pick, or a good recommendation from you guys really. Right under a Snap-on, the tool truck models here still getting bragging rights for the highest numbers overall. If you want a butter smooth feathering trigger without paying Snap-on money, you want the beans right out of the box without having a break-in cycle, get the Aircat. That's your guy, especially if you have a limited air supply. It's really good there, even a standout. But if you want a bit more, 98 to 99% of Snap-on power, a decent trigger, aren't cramped for length, I suppose, for 110, 120 bucks. Sure, I'm biased and I love air tools in general, but it sort of delivers on what we hoped last week the Walmart's latest hyper tough tools would do. Shake up just how much you think high-level performing tools should cost. Appreciate you joining us for this one. We make episodes at least every Friday. Click some stuff to be shown those, and thanks for watching.